The Galactic Coalition Academy stood on a planet called Prime. It was a massive building made of white stone and alien metals that humans could not name. For 300 years, this academy had trained military officers from 47 different species. They came from all corners of the galaxy to learn warfare, diplomacy, and command. Humans had only been allowed to join 12 years ago. They were still considered a probationary species. This meant the coalition was watching them carefully, like a parent watches a child who might cause trouble. The aliens had good reasons for their caution. 12 years before, Earth had fought a terrible war against the coalition. Humanity had lost billions of people. Their cities had burned. Their nations had fallen, but they had never surrendered. This confused the aliens greatly. Every other species, when faced with certain defeat, would submit. They would bow their heads and accept their loss. Humans did not do this. Humans kept fighting even when there was no hope. They crawled out of burning rubble and threw rocks at starships. They refused to die quietly. In the end, the coalition had offered peace instead of extinction. It was easier to make humans into allies than to keep killing them. But the aliens never forgot what they had learned. Humans were dangerous. Humans were unpredictable. Humans did not know when to quit. Cadet Erin was 22 years old. She had been born in the ruins in a shelter built from broken concrete and twisted metal. Her mother had died when she was 6. Her father had raised her alone, teaching her to fight, to survive, and to never show weakness. When the academy opened its doors to humans, Erin was among the first to apply. Now she stood in formation hall with 200 other cadets. The hall was enormous, with ceilings so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top. Flags from all coalition species hung from the walls. The human flag was small and placed in a corner, as if the aliens hoped no one would notice it. Erin was one of only 9 humans in her year. The other species avoided them. They whispered about human adrenaline responses, which could make a human 3 times stronger for short periods. They talked about human pack bonding, which made humans willing to die for strangers. They feared human stubbornness, which made them refuse to accept defeat even when logic demanded it. Today was the quarterly inspection. A high-ranking officer would walk through the formation, examining the cadets and their equipment. It was supposed to be routine. It was supposed to be boring. General, or of the hegemony, was conducting this inspection. They were one of the oldest species in the coalition. They looked like giant insects standing upright. Their bodies were covered in hard plates that could stop a knife. They had 4 arms, each ending in claws as sharp as razors. Their heads held compound eyes that could see in all directions at once. Their mouths were filled with mandibles that clicked when they spoke. They had conquered 11 star systems before joining the coalition. They had done this through violence and intimidation. Among their people, strength was everything. The strong ruled, the weak submitted. This was their law. General Or was 7 feet tall. His armor plates were from dozens of battles. He walked through the formation slowly, his compound eyes examining each cadet. Most of them stood perfectly still, their eyes forward, their breathing controlled. When or passed, they relaxed slightly. Then he stopped in front of Erin. She felt his gaze on her like a physical weight. She kept her eyes forward. She kept her breathing steady. She had been trained for this. This one, or announced loudly, should not be here. His voice carried through the entire hall. Every cadet heard him. Every officer observing from the balconies above heard him. Erin felt 200 pairs of alien eyes turned toward her. She said nothing, or began to circle her slowly, like a predator examining prey. "Humans are a mistake," he said. "A compromise made by weak diplomats who did not have the courage to finish what the coalition started. Your species should have been wiped from the galaxy. Instead, you were given mercy you did not earn." Erin's jaw tightened slightly. She forced herself to relax it. "You breed like parasites," Or continued. "You multiply without control. You spread across planets like a disease, and you fight without honor. He stopped directly in front of her. During your pathetic war, your soldiers used ambushes, traps, and suicide attacks. You struck from the shadows like cowards. You refused to face our warriors openly. We faced extinction, Aaron said quietly. We used what worked. The hall went completely silent. Cadets did not speak during inspection unless asked a direct question. Aaron had broken protocol. Or leaned closer. His mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of anger among the. You refused to surrender even when your extinction was assured. You forced us to kill billions of you before your leaders finally accepted peace. This was not bravery. This was stupidity. Aaron remained silent this time. You are animals, Or said, his voice dropping to a hiss. Animals pretending to be soldiers. Animals wearing uniforms and standing in formation. But underneath, you are still the same savage creatures we found crawling on a small blue rock at the edge of the galaxy. Aaron felt heat rising in her chest. She pushed it down. She controlled her breathing. She had been trained for this. Sir, she said, her voice flat and emotionless, permission to. Or struck her across the face. His primary arm moved faster than most species could track. His claws raked across her cheek, drawing 3 parallel lines of blood. The sound of the impact echoed through the hall like a gunshot. Aaron's head snapped to the side. Blood ran down her face and dripped onto her uniform collar. The pain was sharp and immediate. No one moved. No one spoke. Among most coalition species, this was normal. A ranking officer could physically correct a subordinate. It was a display of dominance. The proper response was to lower your eyes, bow your head, and accept the lesson. Aaron did not lower her eyes. She turned her head back slowly, very slowly. Her dark eyes found Or's compound gaze. Blood ran down her cheek in thin red lines. Her expression had not changed. The hall was silent. Every being in that room was watching. Every being in that room was holding their breath. That, Aaron said quietly, was a mistake. Or's mandibles clicked once. He did not understand. In 300 years, no cadet had ever responded to correction with anything but submission. He was about to learn why humans were different. What happened next would be studied, debated, and replayed across every world in the coalition for years to come. Military academies would use it as a teaching example. Diplomats would reference it in negotiations. Children of a dozen species would watch the footage and ask their parents to explain what they had seen. It lasted 4 seconds. General Or stood before Aaron with his primary arm still extended from the strike. Blood from his claws dripped onto the polished floor. His compound eyes showed satisfaction. He had put the human in her place. He had shown everyone in that hall what humans truly were, weak creatures who could be disciplined like disobedient animals. He expected her to bow her head. He expected her to apologize. He expected her to behave like every other species he had ever dominated. In the first second, Aaron moved. Her left hand shot upward with a speed that surprised even her fellow humans. It was not a wild swing or a desperate grab. It was precise. It was calculated. Her fingers found the gap between the chitinous plates on Or's wrist, the small space where the joint flexed and the armor did not cover. The Academy's xenobiology courses were very thorough. Every cadet learned the basic anatomy of every coalition species. They learned where the bones connected. They learned where the nerves clustered. They learned where each species was strong and where each species was vulnerable. Aaron had paid attention in those classes. She had studied harder than most. She had memorized the weak points of 17 different species, and they were at the top of her list. Her fingers closed around the nerve cluster in Or's wrist. The general felt a sudden spike of pain, sharp and unexpected. His arm locked in place. He could not pull it back. In the second, Aaron stepped forward. She moved inside Or's guard, placing herself close to his massive body. This was counterintuitive. Most species, when facing a larger opponent, tried to create distance. They tried to stay out of reach. But Aaron understood something that most aliens did not. They were stronger than humans by a factor of 3. In a contest of pure strength, Aaron would lose every time. But strength meant nothing if you could not use it. By stepping inside his guard, Aaron made it impossible for Or to use his other 3 arms effectively. They were designed for wide, sweeping strikes. Up close, they were useless. She rotated her hips as she moved, building momentum. Her body became a lever. Or's own forward momentum, the weight he had put behind his strike, became a weapon against him. In the 3rd second, Aaron applied pressure. The wrist was designed to flex in 2 directions, up and down and side to side. It could not rotate. This was a weakness that few species knew about because they rarely engaged in hand-to-hand combat. Their strength usually made such knowledge unnecessary. Aaron knew about it. She twisted Or's wrist at an angle of 47 degrees from its natural flex. This was the angle of maximum vulnerability. This was the angle where the bones would separate and the tendons would tear. She had practiced this technique hundreds of times on training dummies. She had practiced it until the motion was automatic, until she could perform it without thinking. Or felt his arm being bent in a direction it was never meant to go. He felt the bones in his wrist grinding against each other. He felt the tendons stretching past their limits. For the first time in his long military career, he felt true fear. In the 4th second, something cracked. The sound was loud and wet, like a branch breaking underwater. 3 of the subordinate bones in Or's wrist fractured simultaneously. The joint bent backward at an angle that made several observing cadets look away in horror. General Or, veteran of the siege of, conqueror of the Vestral Moons, hero of the 3rd Expansion War, screamed. It was not a battle cry. It was not a shout of anger. It was a scream of pure agony, torn from his throat without thought or control. The sound echoed through Formation Hall and silenced every whisper, every breath, every heartbeat. Aaron released his wrist and stepped back. She moved smoothly into attention position, her hands at her sides, her feet together, her eyes forward. Blood still ran down her cheek from the cuts Or had given her. Her expression had not changed. She did not look angry. She did not look satisfied. She looked calm. Or collapsed to his knees. His massive body hit the floor with a thud that shook the stones. He cradled his ruined arm against his chest, his mandibles clicking frantically in a pattern that indicated extreme distress. His compound eyes were wide and unfocused. The hall remained silent for a long moment. 200 cadets stood frozen in place. The officers on the balconies above stared down with expressions of shock and disbelief. No one knew what to do. Nothing in their training had prepared them for this. A human cadet had just defeated a general in single combat. A human cadet had just broken a flag officer's arm in 4 seconds. A human cadet had done this without showing any emotion at all. Aaron spoke into the silence. Under Coalition Military Code, Section 7, Subsection 3, she said, her voice clear and steady, an unprovoked physical assault by a superior officer may be met with proportional defensive response. She paused for exactly 1 second. I was proportional. Or looked up at her. His compound eyes focused on her face with difficulty. He saw the blood on her cheek. He saw the calm in her eyes. He saw something that he had never seen before in any species. He saw someone who was not afraid of him. The other officers rushed forward to help their general. Medical personnel were called. Security forces entered the hall. Orders were shouted in a dozen different languages. Through it all, Aaron stood at attention and waited. She knew what was coming. She knew she would be arrested. She knew she would face a tribunal. She knew her career and possibly her life might be over. She did not regret what she had done, not for a single moment. When the security forces finally approached her, she allowed them to take her without resistance. She walked with her head held high, her back straight, her steps measured and calm. The other human cadets watched her go with something like awe on their faces. As she passed through the doors, Aaron heard whispers beginning behind her. The cadets were talking. The officers were talking. Within hours, the entire academy would be talking. Within days, the entire coalition would know what had happened. A human had refused to submit. A human had fought back. A human had won. They put Aaron in a holding cell on the lower levels of the academy. The cell was small and clean, with white walls and a narrow bed. A containment field buzzed softly across the doorway, preventing any physical escape. A camera watched her from the corner. She sat on the bed and waited. She did not pace. She did not show anxiety. She had been trained to remain calm in difficult situations, and this training had become part of who she was. The charges against her were serious: insubordination, assault on a flag officer, conduct unbecoming a coalition cadet. The hegemony had already filed a formal complaint with the Coalition Council. They were demanding her execution. Aaron understood the politics of her situation. They were a powerful species with many allies. Humans were newcomers with few friends. If the coalition wanted to maintain peace with the hegemony, sacrificing one human cadet would be a small price to pay. She did not regret what she had done. She had been struck. She had defended herself. This was simple. This was right. On the third day of her confinement, Admiral Wei arrived from Earth. His ship had made the journey in 72 hours, which was impossibly fast. The standard travel time between Earth and Prime was 12 days. Someone had authorized emergency FTL protocols, burning fuel worth more than most warships. This told Aaron exactly how seriously humanity's military council was taking her case. Admiral was a small man, shorter than Aaron by several inches. His hair was, and his face was lined with decades of worry and responsibility. He walked slowly, with the careful steps of someone who had learned to conserve energy for when it mattered. He had survived 3 colonial wars and 2 assassination attempts. He was one of the most respected military leaders humanity had ever produced. He stood on the other side of the containment field and studied Aaron with dark, thoughtful eyes. "You've started something," he said. His voice was soft but carried clearly. "He struck first," Aaron replied. "I know. I've reviewed the footage approximately 600 times. So has every diplomatic corps in the coalition. So has every military academy, every news organization, and every government on every world that has access to the coalition network." Almost smiled. "You're famous, Cadet." Aaron did not react to this information. "Am I going to be executed?" "That depends on the tribunal. They are pushing hard for it. They're claiming you used a forbidden combat technique." "There's no such thing as a forbidden combat technique. I used basic joint manipulation against an opponent who wasn't expecting resistance." "They're claiming humans have an unfair biological advantage in close combat." Aaron considered this for a moment. "We do," she admitted. "Humans have faster reflexes than most species. Our adrenaline response increases our strength and speed temporarily. Our pain tolerance is higher than average. These are evolutionary adaptations. They're not forbidden. They're what we are." Nodded slowly. "That's what I told the council. They're still debating." The tribunal convened 3 days later. Aaron was brought to a large circular chamber in the heart of the academy. 7 judges sat behind a curved table, each representing a different coalition species. They had been excluded in the interest of neutrality, though they had protested loudly. The gallery was packed with observers, diplomats from a dozen worlds, military officers from various fleets, journalists recording everything for broadcast across the galaxy. And in one corner, standing silently with their arms crossed, a small group of human cadets. Aaron's fellow humans had come to watch. They wanted to see what would happen to one of their own. The chief judge was a species known for their commitment to fairness and their complete lack of bias. She was a tall, thin creature with translucent skin and bioluminescent fronds that pulsed with soft colors. Her name was Adjudicator, and she had overseen 300 tribunals without ever being accused of unfairness. "Cadet Aaron of Earth," began, her voice melodic and strange, "you stand accused of assaulting a superior officer. How do you answer these charges?" Aaron stood straight. "I defended myself against an unprovoked attack." "General, or struck you as a form of discipline. This is permitted under coalition military tradition." "General, or struck me because he wanted to humiliate me and my species. I was not being disciplined for any offense. I was being attacked because I am human." Murmurs rippled through the gallery. The fronds flickered rapidly. "You are claiming the general's actions were motivated by species prejudice." "Yes," Aaron said simply. "He made his feelings about humans very clear before he struck me. He called us animals. He said we should have been exterminated. His words are recorded. Everyone in that hall heard them." The prosecution presented its case. They showed footage of the incident from multiple angles. They brought in medical experts who described the extent of General Orr's injuries. They called witnesses who that Aaron had spoken out of turn before being struck. The defense, led by a human military lawyer named Commander, was methodical and thorough. They presented the same footage, highlighting Orr's aggressive body language and threatening words. They brought in who explained that the general's behavior met the legal definition of assault. They pointed to Coalition Military Code Section 7, Subsection 3, which clearly allowed proportional defensive responses. Throughout the proceedings, Aaron answered every question with the same calm honesty she had shown since her arrest. Yes, she knew or was her superior. Yes, she understood the cultural context of physical correction among the. No, she did not believe humans were obligated to accept violence simply because it came from a higher-ranking officer. Yes, she had struck back deliberately. No, she had not intended to cause permanent injury. Yes, she understood that her actions might have serious consequences. Near the end of the tribunal, Adjudicator asked a final question. Her fronds pulsed with colors that Aaron could not interpret. "Cadet, do you regret your actions?" Aaron was silent for a long moment. The entire chamber seemed to hold its breath. "I regret that General Orr chose to test whether humans would submit to violence," she said finally. "I regret that he learned the answer in such a painful way. I regret that this incident has caused tension between the hegemony and humanity." She paused. "But I do not regret defending myself. I was struck without cause. I responded within the limits of the law. I would do the same thing again." The tribunal deliberated for 6 hours. During that time, Aaron was returned to her holding cell. She sat on her bed and waited. She did not show fear or hope or any emotion at all. When she was brought back to the chamber, she saw the verdict in the faces of the judges before they spoke. "By a vote of 5-2, Adjudicator announced, this tribunal finds Cadet Aaron not guilty of assault. Her actions are deemed to fall within the scope of proportional defensive response as defined by Coalition Military Code." The gallery erupted. Voices shouted in a dozen languages. The human cadets cheered. The observers stormed out in fury. Aaron stood perfectly still and allowed herself one small breath of relief. She was free, but she knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning. The footage spread like fire through dry grass. Every attempt to suppress it failed. 9 different species had cadets in Formation Hall that day, and at least one member of each species had been recording on their personal device. Within hours of the incident, copies existed on hundreds of worlds. Within a week, it had reached every system in the coalition. People watched a small human woman take down a general in 4 seconds. They watched her remain calm while blood ran down her face. They watched her stand at attention after breaking his wrist, as if nothing unusual had happened. They watched her speak about proportional response in a voice that carried no anger, no fear, no satisfaction. The reactions varied widely across species. They were furious. Their government issued formal protests. Their citizens called for sanctions against Earth. Their military demanded the right to send their own officers to human training facilities to teach humans their place. A species known for their strategic thinking studied the footage with great interest. They noted how quickly Erin had assessed the situation. They noted how precisely she had exploited Or's weakness. They began quietly requesting more information about human combat training. A peaceful species devoted to art and philosophy were disturbed by what they saw. They had always known humans were violent. They had hoped that violence was a temporary stage in human development, something humanity would grow beyond as it became more civilized. The footage suggested otherwise. The Coalition Council met in emergency session 3 weeks after the tribunal ended. Representatives from every major species gathered in the Great Chamber on Unity Station, the massive space platform that served as the Coalition's capital. The topic of discussion was simple: what to do about humans. Ambassador Eth of the collective was the first to speak. She was a delicate creature with pale skin and chromatophores that changed color based on her emotional state. Today, those chromatophores pulsed with shades of and blue that indicated worry and confusion. "You must understand," she said, addressing the full council, "what this incident means to species who have only known humans through diplomatic channels. We knew you were violent. We knew you were stubborn. We had been told about the first contact war and the billions who died. But knowing something and seeing it are very different experiences." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "We did not know you could do what Cadet did. We did not know humans could face a threat 3 times their size and respond with such perfect calm. We did not know your species could take a blow to the face and then, without any change in expression, destroy the one who struck you." She defended herself, Admiral said from the human delegation seats. "This is not unusual behavior." "It is extremely unusual," Eth replied. "For most species, being struck by a superior triggers an automatic submission response. This is built into our biology. When a dominant individual shows aggression, we instinctively back down. We make ourselves smaller. We show our throats or our bellies or whatever vulnerable part of our anatomy signals surrender." "Humans don't have that response," acknowledged. "No, you do not, and that is terrifying." Counselor of the leaned forward with interest. "Terrifying seems like a strong word." She broke his wrist. "This is painful but not unprecedented. Officers of many species have been injured in combat or in training accidents." "It is not the injury that frightens us," Eth explained. "It is what the injury represents." Cadet was faced with a being who was larger, stronger, and more powerful than her in every measurable way. He struck her and drew blood. The correct biological response, the response that evolution has programmed into almost every species in this coalition, would be to submit, to bow, to accept defeat. Her chromatophores flashed a deep, pulsing red. Instead, she attacked, and she won. And then she stood there, bleeding, and calmly explained why her actions were legal. "Do you understand how wrong this feels to species like mine? It goes against everything we know about how living beings behave." Admiral rose slowly from his seat. He was a small figure among the massive alien forms that filled the chamber, but something in the way he moved commanded attention. 40 years ago," he began, his voice quiet but clear, "the Coalition fleet arrived at Earth. You gave us 12 hours to surrender or face extinction. At that time, humanity had no fleet. We had no faster-than-light capability. We had nuclear weapons and 7 billion people." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "Your strategists calculated that we would surrender within 6 hours. You had overwhelming force. Resistance was mathematically impossible. By every model you possessed, we should have accepted your terms and become a subject species. You did not, Counselor said. It was not a question. We did not. We launched every nuclear weapon we had at your fleet. We destroyed 3 of your ships before you overwhelmed our defenses. Then you began your bombardment. His voice remained steady, but something hard entered his eyes. You burned South America first. 80 million people died in the first wave. You expected us to surrender then. We did not. You burned Europe, 200 million more. You expected us to surrender then. We did not. You burned Asia, Africa, Australia. 3 billion people died in the first year of the war. The chamber was completely silent. We fought you from ruins. We fought you from caves. We fought you with sticks and stones when our ammunition ran out. Children too young to hold weapons carried messages between resistance cells. Old men who could barely walk strapped explosives to their bodies and walked into your landing zones. Ed's chromatophores had gone completely white. Why, she whispered, why would you not stop? Because surrender was not an option we could accept, said simply. Not because we thought we could win. We knew we couldn't. Not because we were too stupid to understand our situation. We understood perfectly. We chose to fight anyway. We chose to make you pay for every inch of our planet in blood. That war ended in compromise, reminded him. That war ended because your leaders realized that exterminating us would cost more than making peace. We didn't break. We never even considered breaking. You could have killed every last human on Earth, and the final survivor would have died throwing rocks at your ships. Looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every species present. Cadet did nothing unusual by human standards. She was struck. She defended herself. She refused to submit. This is what humans do. This is what we have always done. This is what we will always do. He sat down. For a long moment, no one spoke. You are saying, Ev finally said, that what we witnessed was not an exceptional human. She was a typical human. Yes. You are saying that every human, if placed in that same situation, would respond the same way. Most of them agreed. Not all. We have cowards and weaklings like any species, but the majority of humanity would rather die than accept domination. This is not training. This is not culture. This is who we are. The council session continued for several more hours, but the outcome had already been decided. Humanity would remain in the coalition. They would receive formal apologies for their generals' injuries. New rules would be established regarding physical discipline of human cadets. But more importantly, something had changed in the way the galaxy saw humanity. They were no longer simply the newcomers, the probationary species, the violent primitives who had somehow survived their first contact. They were something else now. They were the species that did not submit. They were the species that did not break. They were humans. 6 months passed. The galaxy kept turning. Wars were fought and treaties were signed. Species rose and fell in the endless dance of interstellar politics. And slowly, quietly, things began to change. Erin graduated from the Coalition Academy with honors. Her scores were excellent across every subject, from tactical analysis to. Her combat evaluations were perfect. Her instructors, who had once looked at her with suspicion and doubt, now wrote glowing recommendations. She was assigned to the Coalition's Rapid Response Corps, an elite unit that handled the most dangerous missions in Coalition space. The Corps had existed for 2 centuries, but in the past year, something had changed. They had begun recruiting more heavily from Earth. Some said this was because humans made excellent shock troops. Others said it was because the Coalition wanted to put humans in harm's way, reducing their numbers through combat. Still others believed the Corps leadership had simply recognized what humans could do and wanted more of them. Erin did not care about the reasons. She cared about the work. General Orr's wrist healed after 3 months of advanced medical treatment. They had excellent doctors, and their regeneration technology was among the best in the galaxy. Physically, he made a full recovery, but he never returned to the academy. Some said he had taken medical retirement. Others said he had been quietly transferred to a distant outpost where no one would remember his shame. A few whispered that he had requested the transfer himself, unable to face the cadets who had watched a human half his size bring him to his knees. Erin did not think about him often. He was part of her past, a closed chapter in a life that stretched forward into the stars. On the day of her graduation, the Academy admitted its largest class of human cadets in history. 47 young men and women arrived from Earth's rebuilt cities, from the orbital stations that circled the planet, from the colony ships that had begun spreading humanity across the stars. They walked through the Academy's great gates with their heads held high. They wore their uniforms with pride. They looked at the alien species around them without fear, without hostility, but also without submission. The other cadets noticed this. They noticed the way humans moved, the way they carried themselves, the way they looked at the world. There was something different about them, something that had always been there but had never been so visible. Humans stood like they owned the ground beneath their feet. They walked like they had already decided they would not be moved. They looked at larger species like they were measuring the distance to their weak points. It made many aliens uncomfortable. It made some of them angry, but increasingly it made them careful. Ambassador Eth watched the new cadets from an observation gallery high above the main courtyard. She had requested permission to attend the admission ceremony, though she was not sure why. Perhaps she wanted to understand something that still confused her. Admiral appeared beside her, moving quietly for such an old man. He stood at the railing and looked down at the cadets below. "Are you still frightened?" he asked. Eth considered the question for a long moment. Her chromatophores shifted through colors that could not interpret. "Terrified," she admitted finally, "but I think I understand now." "Understand what?" "Why you fight, why you never surrender, why that young woman broke a general's wrist without flinching." Eth turned to face him. "You're not trying to prove you're superior. You're not trying to establish dominance. You're not trying to intimidate anyone. Then what are we trying to do?" "You're not trying to do anything. You simply refuse to be treated as lesser, every single one of you, every time." Her fronds pulsed with soft blue light. "It's not aggression. It's not violence for its own sake. It's something else, something I don't have a word for in my language." "In our language, we call it dignity," said quietly. Eth considered this. "Dignity, yes. That word exists in our language too, but I don't think it means the same thing. For my people, dignity is something given by society. It can be earned or lost based on status and behavior, but for humans, dignity is something we are born with, finished. It cannot be earned because we already have it. It cannot be lost because it is part of what we are. The only way to take our dignity is to kill us, and even then, we often choose death over surrender." Below them, the new cadets were being sorted into their training groups. A drill instructor, a massive with 4 legs and a booming voice, was shouting orders. The human cadets obeyed promptly and precisely, but they did not flinch at the instructor's volume. They did not lower their eyes. One human cadet, a young man with dark skin and broad shoulders, was standing next to a cadet that was larger by far, with armor plates and claws and compound eyes that saw in all directions. The two species had been enemies not so long ago. Many still resented humanity's presence in the coalition. They glanced at the human beside him. His mandibles clicked once, twice. The human noticed the look and turned to face him. "Problem?" the human asked. His voice was calm and quiet. They studied him for a long moment. He saw the human's straight posture. He saw the steadiness in his eyes. He remembered the footage that every being in the galaxy had seen. He remembered what had happened to General Orr. "No," he said finally, "no problem." The human nodded once and turned back to face the drill instructor. It was a small moment. It would not be recorded in any history. No one would study it or analyze it or debate its meaning, but it was important nonetheless. Because it was a moment when I looked at a human and decided not to challenge them. Not out of fear, exactly. Not out of respect, exactly. But out of something that was growing between the species of the coalition and their members. Understanding. Admiral watched the interaction from above. He allowed himself a small smile. "It's changing," Eth said, following his gaze. "The way other species see you, the way they treat you." "Yes." "Is this what you wanted? When Cadet broke that general's wrist, is this the outcome you were hoping for?" Thought about the question for a long time before answering. "We didn't plan what happened in that hall," he said. "We didn't train Cadet to pick a fight with a flag officer. She simply reacted the way any human would react when they're struck without cause. She defended herself. But the result? The result is that the galaxy finally sees us clearly. They see that we will not be pushed around. They see that we will not accept being treated as lesser beings. They see that trying to dominate us is painful and pointless." He turned to face Eth directly. "We never wanted to frighten anyone. We never wanted to intimidate anyone. We just wanted to be treated with the same dignity that every other species takes for granted. And now, maybe, we will be." Below, Lieutenant Aaron appeared at the edge of the courtyard. She was there to observe the new cadets, to see the next generation of human officers beginning their training. She wore her new rank insignia with quiet pride. A group of alien cadets saw her and fell silent. They knew who she was. Everyone knew who she was. Aaron met their eyes calmly. She did not smile. She did not frown. She simply nodded once, acknowledging their attention, and then turned to watch the humans being processed into their new lives. 47 new human cadets. 47 young people who had grown up on a world that had been burned and rebuilt. 47 individuals who had been raised on stories of the First Contact War, who had been taught to never submit, who carried within them the same fire that had kept humanity fighting when all hope was lost. They would face challenges in the years ahead. They would face prejudice and doubt and hostility from species who feared what they represented. Some would fail, some would fall, but most of them would succeed. And someday, perhaps, a human would stand at the head of the coalition itself. Someday, perhaps, the species that had refused to surrender would help lead the galaxy into a new era. For now, it was enough to watch the new cadets take their first steps. It was enough to know that humanity's future was beginning. It was enough to remember that no one, not ever again, would dare to strike a human and expect them to submit. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humans did not kneel.